so much for joining me. Welcome. The French government is aiming for 18 gigawatts in 2035, 40 gigawatt in 2050. What's needed to achieve these goals, Matthieu?
Hi, Lisa. Hi, everyone. Very glad to be here. Matthieu Monnier, so Deputy CEO indeed of France Renouvelables, and we represent the French wind industry with Maëlie. Yes, the current government plans 18 gigawatt by 2035 and 45 gigawatt by 2050. You know that we have a particular political context, but for the industry, we stay on track in order to plan those volumes. And the first question, the first condition to succeed is indeed the planning. On the one hand, the energy planning, and on the other hand, the maritime spatial planning. That's essential because those exercises exist for years in Europe. We have European obligations on that with the national energy and climate plans and the maritime spatial planning. In France, I think everyone here knows the PPE, the Multi-Year Energy Plan, Programmation Pluriannuelle de l'Énergie.
The energy roadmap for France.
Exactly. It's one part of the NECP, National Energy and Climate Plan. The current PPE was, let's say, modest in terms of volume for the offshore wind. It was progressive, but we had regular volumes and maybe smaller volumes compared to other countries in Europe, such as Germany and the Netherlands. But we signed a sector deal 2 years ago with the government, with the industry, with Aurélie as well and her president, to say, okay, we will boost the local content, the jobs in France, the investments, 40 billion euros investment for the next years. And on the other hand, the state will take the energy and maritime spatial planning into force in the law, in the decrees, in the programs. And for the PPE, the idea is to boost the growth and to award bigger volumes. In the past, we had for each project nearly 500 megawatts, and now we will have between 1.2 and 2 gigawatts. Maëlie will talk about it. And the idea is to have several projects, bigger projects, but in one round, one tender, so that we can, let's say, launch more activity. And the idea is also to make sure that we diversify the market. We do not concentrate it, so that several stakeholders can win and can, let's say, diversify also the industry. That's for the volumes. For the second point, maritime spatial planning, we all know that in Europe we have a lot of sea users, especially our friends, the fishermen, and we closely work with them and with all the stakeholders, also the citizens. We had a public debate for 6 months, and we should have let's say, the report today. And we have to make sure that we coexist all together, and we make, let's say, a proper plan with precise zones, so that we can launch the volumes that I mentioned. And those two programs are really key, fundamental, so that we can eventually succeed for the volumes you mentioned. And I will detail after that the other conditions that we have to take into account.
Maëlie, tell us a bit more about volumes. How much capacity can be added per year in terms of tenders, in terms of offshore wind, but also in terms of grid structure in France?
Yeah, well, hello everyone. Thank you for having us today with Matthieu. So we are currently working on this second exercise of planning for France with all our members. And in terms of volume, we're mostly looking at 3 big rounds, 3 mega auction, to be awarded every 2 to 3 years, with a capacity ranging from 8 to 12 gigawatts, roughly, approximately. And why not doing bigger? Well, what sets the pace mostly is the grid connection. So we are currently working on a phasing of the project. And yeah, we took for that 3 constraints. The first one is you don't want to have, we can't have floating beyond 100 meters deep before 2040. That's the first condition. Second is the capacity grid on local connection. And third, we know we've been discussing it with the French TSO RTE that they're mostly likely to be able to commission every year 1.2 plus 2 gigawatts per year. So that's the main constraints. And from that, we worked on scenarios, provisional schedulings to understand how long does it take to develop, well, both floating and bottom fixed farms, and for 2 sizes, 1.2 and 2 gigawatts. And from that, we drew on this schedule and we applied it for the phasing of the project so it's feasible, coherent from a network point of view. And we are also paying attention to the proportion of floating. You don't want to have, we want floating industry to progressively ramp up. So having no discontinuity with the first floating project that just been awarded recently in South Brittany, so having some floating, but for the first round having more bottom fix and then shifting towards more floating. And in the end, it should be around, and we're still working on this, it's still ongoing, but we should be around 40% of bottom fix and 60% of floating by the end of 2050.
And to get all that on track, Matthieu, what kind of hurdles are in the way?
Yeah, so I mentioned the different plans. That's the first step. Second step is to prepare, let's say, almost everything, the infrastructures, the supply chain, and the workforce. Infrastructures, it seems obvious, but we have to make sure that the grid connection is ready, that the electrical system is ready so that we can welcome huge volumes compared to the current volumes. At the moment, we have 1.5 gigawatt. It's okay. We had, let's say, margins to integrate the electricity because we have a very strong network in France, thanks to the previous, let's say, development for the nuclear industry and the hydroelectricity. But now we have no more margins. So we have to rethink the electrical system, and RTE, our TSO, currently thinks about a development plan for the grids for 10 years, the next 10 years, the SDDR, Schéma décennal de développement du réseau, and we should have more feedback from RTE where they should reinforce the grid, where they should build new lines, onshore and offshore as well, and also maybe where they could conceive interconnections. So the grid is fundamental, and we have to invest a lot, billion euros as well. Generally, we say when we have to invest €1 in renewables, we have to invest €1 in the grid. But that's the same for nuclear industry. We have to invest in grid. Second, harbors infrastructures. We are in Nantes. They invested a lot of money so that we can build and install Saint-Nazaire offshore wind farm, Monnier, and other projects. The infrastructures are adapted for offshore wind, but for the current offshore wind. For tomorrow, we will have bigger wind turbines, 20, 22, 24, we don't know, and we have to adapt the infrastructures. Also, especially for floating offshore wind, we have to think different because we built everything in the harbors infrastructures. So the General Secretariat for Investment in France, they launched a call for interest to adapt the harbors infrastructures and to finance those updates, let's say. And we should have new projects for next year. and they should invest money so that we are right on time for floating offshore wind especially. Second, I said the supply chain. The installation means, so our colleagues from shipping, they are fundamental so that we have enough ships to install the offshore wind farm. And that's the same bottleneck for all over Europe. And that's very key that we make sure that for our installations, we have ships from France mainly, but also from all over Europe. And third, and that's also one of the tasks of Aurélie with the CSF, we have to work on the competences. The competences, the know-how, and the training of people, the education. And now we have a strong network of universities, of centers, etc., but not enough. And we have also big needs also for the nuclear industry, for the grids at the same time. So we have to make sure that the three points are addressed.
Right. So we're going to hear more about the supply chain in the next session. But before I let you go, Maëlie, do you want to add anything to that? Should the government be doing more? And if so, what actually to support the sector?
Well, we just talked about timing and scheduling, and what we as trade association advocate for is accelerating the pre-qualification phase and the award, basically, the whole phase award. There's been lately some announcement from the government to reduce by half the duration, to go from 3 years to 1 to 1 year and a half to award these projects. So it means three things. First, you need to anticipate all the surveys, initial surveys for geotechnical, geophysical, environmental data, so you can award by the end of 2026 the next mega tender Matthieu talked about, the number 10, we call it. That means starting by the end of this year, the surveys to be on time. Also, strengthen the capacity of the government in terms of to assess the bids, to monitor offshore wind, so rationalize this and centralize the capacity like we can do for nuclear, for example, with a special agency dedicated to this topic. And also in terms of procedures overall, we're reducing the duration of authorization process to 1 year, and also reducing the contentious appeals to 1 year. That's a legal thing we ask for. So we make sure we are on time to reach our target, that is 18 gigawatts commissioned by the end of 2035, and then the same for the next coming up to 2050, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so there's still a lot to do. Thank you so much, Matthieu Monnier and Maëlie Benistand-Hector, for sharing all this with us.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you for listening.
Mm-hmm.